just because someone has agreed to terms doesn't mean that they're going to be on that team, because they can change their mind. You know, once upon a time, we saw Anthony Barr sign this massive deal with the Jets, get a change of heart, or not sign, agree to a massive deal with the Jets, have a change of heart, and then went back to Minnesota, right? So that's why the tampering period is important, but even more so, Wednesday is so important, because that's the day where you can officially say, hey, this guy is going to be a part of X team, right? Because he signed the contract officially. So this one's going to be quick because we're talking about a kicker. You know, I don't like to spend a ton of time talking about a kicker, but once again, for the second time this offseason, the Commanders have done something, or maybe in the process of doing something, that we didn't think was going to be an issue because we felt like they had already handled it, right? Or it was already handled. Jake Moody was a guy that they signed in season amid all of the kicking woes that we had with this team last year. We started out with a kicker that we signed to a massive one-year deal, Matt Gay, from the Indianapolis Colts. Gave him the richest contract in a one-year format in terms of guaranteed money any kicker has ever gotten for 1 year of service, fully guaranteed. And obviously it did not pan out. Matt Gay was awful here. It started in the preseason, his very first game, and it didn't end until his tenure here in Washington ended. And so the Commanders apparently, and let's just get to the news of the day, this per Jordan Schultz sources, the Commanders are not planning to tender place kicker Jake Moody, who will be a restricted free agent. He will become a free agent. The 26-year-old was 18 of 20 on field goals last year during his time in Chicago and Washington, including 2 for 2 from 50 with a long of 56. So we'll get into his numbers here in a second. But as a matter of fact, let's just go ahead and transition to those right now. So he spent the first part of the season in he's had 3 different teams. So he had actually 3 different portions of his season. Started the season with the team that drafted him in the 3rd round, the San Francisco 49ers. He struggled to start the season with them. They were not pleased with what he gave them. They moved on from him. He then signed with the Chicago Bears. You should know that very well because his first game as a Bear came against us in week 6, and he kicked the game-winning kick to beat us in that football game, 24-22. And so Jake Moody essentially wrecked our season, right? He spent a couple weeks there because the Bears already had a kicker in Cairo Santos. He was just banged up, so he was only filling that void while Cairo Santos was on the mend. Once Santos came back, he was relieved of his duties. That was in the midst of us going through our kicking nightmare with Matt Gay. So eventually they went out, got him off of Chicago's practice squad, signed him, and this is what he effectively did for the 6 games that he kicked for the Commanders to finish up the season. Denver game, off the bye, overtime loss. He was 2 for 2 from 30 to 39 yards, made both of his extra points for a total of 8 points in that game. The Minnesota game the following week, we didn't score. So it's easy to do that math. The Giants game in week number, what was it? 16, 17, 15, week 15. I thought this was his most impressive game of the season because it was super windy that day in the Meadowlands, if you recall. He did miss an extra point, or I think was it a field goal or extra point. And then he overcorrected on his next kick. And the next kick was a pretty long one, like 46 yards or something like that. And he overcorrected for the wind, and it drew it right through the middle of the uprights. I thought that was pretty impressive on his part to be able to adjust after having the wind take his kick on the extra point. So in that game, he was 1 of 1 from 30 to 39, 2 of 2 from 40 to 49, which I call the money distance. The vast majority of your kicks in this league will come from 40 to 49 if you have an aggressive coaching staff that's going to go for it. And if you have a very efficient offense, you're not going to be kicking a bunch of field goals from 30 to 39 yards. You see the numbers with us last year. He kicked the most kicks from 30 to 39 yards and 20 to 29 yards, which is ridiculous. But we sucked on offense last year. So generally speaking, most of your kicks in this league are going to come from 40 to 49 yards. And that's the money distance for me. He went 2 for 2 that game there with the long of 46. That was the one that he was able to readjust after missing his extra point, which he went 2 of 3 in that game. But again, the win took that one. So you go to the Eagles game on a Saturday. He was 1 of 1 from 20 to 29 yards. Remember, we forced a fumble on the opening kickoff and couldn't get it in the end zone. And because they didn't want to not come away with points, they kicked like a 21-yard field goal. It was embarrassing, right? Your season is over. You suck, and you're not going to go for it, because in the back of their mind, the Minnesota game, we went for it on the first possession of the game, didn't get it from the 2-yard line, and didn't score. So they bitched up basically and kicked a 20, which is a 21-yard field goal is the worst in football. I mean, there's a time and a place for it. You're 3 and whatever at that point. Go for it, right? Doesn't matter. We were going to lose the game anyway. And he kicked 1 extra point in the game, so 5 total points there. The Dallas game on Christmas Day, again, another 2 field goals from 20 to 29 yards, which is embarrassing. He did have a 50-yard field goal in that game from 51 yards, which is a sight for sore eyes. We don't make many 50-yard field. Matt Gay couldn't make any kick past 48 yards here. So that's a sight for sore eyes. 3 for 3 in the field goal department in that game, 2 for 2 in the extra point department. Then in the Eagles game, he missed a field goal from 20 to 29 yards. I chalked that up to him knowing the assignment. We were supposed to be losing that game, not winning it. So as far as I was concerned, he was trying to do us a solid, but he also banged one home from 56 yards last year as well in that particular game. So while he understood the assignment, he also understood that he needed to try to keep his job. So there's a balance there. 56 is pretty damn gnarly, especially when you're a team like us that has had trouble finding kickers who can kick the football 50-plus yards through the uprights consistently. Both of his 50-yard field goals here in Washington, he made them. That's something that should make you excited. It did for me, at least. 3 for 3 in his extra points in that game for a grand total of 19 of 23 on field goals with the actually 18 of 20 on field goals with the Commanders, right? Only missed 2 kicks, and he missed 1 extra point. So he was really good with us down the stretch in those 6 games. Really reliable, right? So begs the question now, why didn't they tender him? He is a restricted free agent because he's got 3 years of service in the league, and he's still on his rookie contract. So by definition, being that he was cut already, we still have the right of first refusal, right? If you tender him. They did not. That is the report from Andrew Schultz, that they're not going to tender him, or Jordan Schultz, called his man Andrew Schultz. Jordan Schultz, that they're not going to tender him. So what does this mean? Why aren't they tendering him? This is a position that we've had so many issues finding a guy to be consistent. We may have found a guy. He's young. He's only 26 years old. You're hoping he can be the answer to all of your kicking woes. Why let him even test free agency? I've got a theory, okay? I think this is an overcorrection by Adam Peters. I don't blame him, by the way, okay? You've got to see it from his perspective. Last year, he went all in. Really, since he's gotten here 2 years in a row, he's went all in on kickers. The first year, it was Brandon McManus. It ended up being Freaky McManus. He was out of here. The next year, and obviously we had issues kicking that year, right? So then he says, all right, enough of this shit. He goes out and gets Matt Gay, pays him the most money that any kicker has ever made on a 1-year deal, fully guaranteed. And he was a dud, epic fail. And so he's looking around saying, I'm not trying to overspend on a kicker again. I'm not doing that. And so if you tender Jake Moody, remember, Jake Moody was a 3rd-round pick. So it's not like he was a 7th-round pick and you could just tender him at the round he was selected and it's going to be peanuts you're paying him. You know, there's a 1st-round tender, there's a 2nd-round tender, and then there's an original round tender. And he's a 3rd-round pick. So I think the 1st-round tender would have been $7 million. You're not 1st-round tendering Jake Moody because no one's going to. Because remember, with that tender comes a price tag. There's an attachment to it. You're not just tendering the guy so that if someone signs him, you get a 1st-round pick. If no one signs him and no one's going to give you a 1st-round pick for Jake Moody, you have to pay him $7 million. No one's doing that. That's more money than you paid Matt Gay last year, right? To be a failure. A 2nd-round tender is around $5 million. Again, that's what you paid Matt Gay roughly last year to be pretty much trash. You're not doing that again. So you're not going to 2nd-round tender. And again, nobody's going. Jake Moody isn't Brandon Aubrey. No one's giving you a 2nd-round pick. No one's going to try and sign him away from you. So you're not tendering him on this with a 2nd-round tender where you got to pay him $5 million. And then an original tender, which means the round that he was originally drafted in, you pay him the price according to, the money in that round. I can only imagine. I don't actually know the specifics of each round after the 1st and 2nd round because those are the 2 most popular tenders. But I would imagine if 1st round is 7 and the 2nd round is 5, the 3rd round is probably somewhere around $3 million. Again, I'm not paying Jake Moody $3 million. Okay? I'm not doing it. So this makes sense that they didn't tender him. Now, the question then becomes, do they want him back? I think the answer is yes. Are they going to look at other kickers? Potentially. And I'll just take a look at some of the kickers real quick and see if there are any kickers here that necessarily, make sense. I don't see any kickers here other than some guys that are restricted free agents. Jake Bates in Detroit makes a ton of sense. He's a restricted free agent. The Lions aren't letting him walk away. They'll just let you sign him, and then they'll match whatever you sign him to, more likely than not. Chad Ryland is interesting in Arizona. Again, restricted free agent. See, Brandon Aubrey is a restricted free agent. The Cowboys aren't letting him leave. Andrew Schmidt is a free agent, restricted free agent in Cleveland. And Blake Groupie is a restricted free agent in Indianapolis, which he's interesting, but he's also really inconsistent, which is why he was let go by the New Orleans Saints. So when I tell you that the kicker market isn't a robust one, and you've got a young kicker here that obviously Adam Peters is very comfortable with because, again, he was a part of the brain trust in San Francisco that drafted him. I don't know if he was on board with drafting him in the 3rd round. I think that was a knee-jerk reaction to all of the struggles that the 49ers had at the kicking position, and they were a really good team at the time, and they just needed a guy to come in here and solve all of their kicking woes. Anytime you overreact to having kicking issues and you spend a 3rd round pick on a kicker, you're going to pay for that, okay? Generally speaking, you overdraft a kicker, it's going to come back to bite you in the ass. I've talked about this for years. There's no reason to draft a kicker before the 5th round. All right. 5th round and later, knock yourself out, get yourself a really good kicker. But if it takes a 3rd or a 4th round pick to draft a kicker, maybe a 4th round pick, maybe a 4th round pick, you cannot spend a day 2 pick on a kicker. It generally does not work out. You're breaking a rule and you're going to pay for that. Maybe the 4th round pick, if this guy is really, really good, you do it. And there's other teams that are desperate. But if I were a general manager, philosophically, I wouldn't even look at a kicker until the 5th round. I'm not spending for the same reason we just talked about from a tender issue, standpoint, right? You could tender a guy at a 5th round tender. It's not going to cost you. It probably costs you, $1.5 million, $1 million at a 5th round tender. I do that. It's no issues, right? If I really believe in this guy and I think he's really good and I don't want him to just be able to walk away, I could original round tender him. And that'll give me a chance to have the right of first refusal. And if I want to have him back, if someone wants to sign him to a 3-year deal worth $3 million per year, and I think he's worth it, then I can get him back, right? But not tendering Jake Moody at a 3rd round tender for $3 million at this point of his career where he has not shown the ability to be consistent. I'll bring Jake Moody back for, $1.5 million, 1-year deal. I'll bring Jake Moody back for $1.25 million and see what he's got. I'm not bringing Jake Moody back for $3 million. I think this is a money issue here more so than anything else. But I do think they are interested in bringing Jake Moody back because the kicking market isn't one that is, again, robust. And I don't think this draft is necessarily a great one from a kicking perspective, but I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and bullshit you like I do because I don't. But do you really want a rookie kicker? I mean, I think that's the real question. What we've seen over the years is elite kickers. You may be able to find, and this is 1 out of every, 5 or 6 kickers. An elite kicker comes along and he's ready to go right out of the packaging and he hits the ground running. But for the most part, you got to go through trial and error with these kickers. They got to come in the league. They got to struggle somewhere. And then they get another opportunity or they got to go to a different league, right? After not cutting it at the NFL level, they got to go to a different league. And then they come to the NFL and then they find their footing. Or you got to find them like the Cowboys did with Brandon Aubrey. Remember, he kicked in the UFL, right? Jake Bates kicked in the UFL. Then they came to the NFL. So they got all their shit out of the way over there in an alternate league, killed it there because you're not going to get an opportunity here if you're not killing it over there. And then they came here and they were ready to kick, right? Generally, when you draft kickers, there's a struggle that comes along with those kickers. That's why we were hoping that a guy like Cade York got his struggles out of the way. Now he comes to Washington and we got something. That wasn't the case. He just continued to struggle. So the hope is Jake Moody got all of his struggles out in San Francisco. He's now figured it out and he's ready to be a consistent kicker in this league. We are always the team that does all of the heavy lifting. We're the team that allows a kicker to work out all of his kinks. And then by the time he's ready to be a professional kicker in the league, we've had it up to here with his nonsense. So we get rid of him. And then a Graham Gano becomes a Graham Gano. Or D-Hop has a Pro Bowl year like he did for the Cleveland Browns, right? After we let him walk away, after we got rid of him. Sean Sweezum became a good kicker after we got rid of him, which we needed to. He wasn't good here, right? The list goes on and on and on. So I'm just hoping this is the answer to our kicking issues. I don't think they're going to just get rid of Jake Moody. I think this is more of, we're not paying you what is attached to a tender because you were drafted in the 3rd round. We're not 1st round tendering you at $7 million. We're not 2nd round tendering you at $5 million. First and foremost, no one's going to sign you away from us for us to even feel the need to put a 1st or a 2nd round tender on you. So that's out of the window. Plus the money that's attached to it. We're not going to original round tender you because you were a 3rd round pick. So that's still going to cost us $4 or $3 million, not doing that. And so we'll take our chances on the open market. Teams aren't going to be making a beeline for your kicker early on in the process. You put him on the back burner, or they could still get it done before free agency starts. Again, they have a week to figure out if they want to sign Jake Moody to a 1 year, $1.5 million deal, or a 1 year, $1 million deal, whatever the case may be, and give him a chance to show that he's worthy of a long-term contract. If not, you move on from him. That's what you do with kickers. But you just don't want to have a high price tag attached to him like we did last year with Matt Gay. They're not doing that again. And I don't blame him. So don't put too much stock into this. No, he's not being tendered, nor should he be. But I do think Jake Moody is back as the Commanders kicker in 2026. I think he earned the right to get an opportunity to be the first kicker in line here. I'm not saying don't bring in competition. Don't bring in another leg to camp, right? An undrafted kicker. You're not drafting a kicker. You got 6 draft picks. You can't afford to do that. But I'm not saying don't bring in an undrafted and see what the kid's got. I'm not saying don't bring in another veteran kicker if somebody shakes free from another team eventually, because, you know, there are teams that hoard kickers. They've got 3 kickers on the roster. They've got 4 kickers. The Lions last year is a great example. Had like 4 kickers on the roster, right? So eventually these teams will have to trim down their roster, get rid of some of these kickers, and maybe you're interested in one of these guys. I just talked about a Joshua Carty in Arizona. He could be a guy that shakes free because they already have a kicker in Chad Rydland in Arizona. And so eventually Josh Carty, who was good at first for the Rams, and then it just went off the rails, maybe he shakes free and you're interested in bringing him into camp to compete. I'm okay with that. So we'll see what they decide to do. This is an important conversation, though. As much as I hate talking about kickers and kicking and all of that shit, it's an important, because kickers aren't important until they are. And people love to make jokes. We're talking about a kicker, and then when we get to week 4 and the kicker misses 2 kicks and we lose a game that we could have won, now you bitching about the kicker. You can't have it both ways. This is an important position because I've always said this, and I'll continue to say this: any position that affects the scoreboard is a big, important position. And for the most part, that's every position on the field. But no position as a specialist affects the game more than a place kicker, because he directly affects whether or not you add an extra point or 3 points to the scoreboard. One miss on an extra point can alter the way you attack the rest of the game. At some point, you may have to go for 2 to chase the point that you missed. And then if you don't get that 2-point conversion, now you look up at the scoreboard and all of a sudden you lose the game by 3 points. We've seen that happen before here in Washington as well, where you go chasing points, you don't get it, and you ultimately lose the game by the amount of points if you'd just made the extra point. So don't poo-poo kickers. Don't turn your nose up at this conversation, because you need kickers. Kickers are important. Anyway, I digress. So let's get to the comment section and see what you guys have to say. We got one comment and then we will get out of here. So Dime Analysis, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Dime Analysis writes, just in Cincinnati not tagging Trey, set to become a free agent. That's not news. We knew he wasn't getting franchise tagged again. They went down that road before, basically, with him. They're not going down that road again. So, I mean, he was never franchise tagged. He was under a contract that was severely underpaying him. But this was a means to an end. They weren't going to franchise tag him. You know, Cincinnati's not in a position to do that right now. They're spending a lot of money on receivers and offensive weapons. They can't spend that kind of money on an aging edge rusher like Trey Hendrickson. Again, he doesn't feel like a fit here. I'm just going to be honest with you. he doesn't feel like a free agent target here. Speaking of which, I am going to do a very comprehensive show tonight where I give you what I believe is the game plan for the Commanders. I've been thinking long and hard about this over the last 2 nights. So I'm going to do that tomorrow. Give you a very comprehensive plan on what I think the Commanders, will do, how they'll target certain position groups, what their thinking is, their thought process, I think will be, just to kind of give you, a bit of framework as to where their psyche will be heading into free agency and what you should expect. Because I think some of you are thinking they're going to go out here and turn this into a video game, and they're not. I've said they're going to be aggressive. I also said it may not be the kind of aggressive you may be thinking, or it may not be the players you would target, but they're going to be aggressive in free agency. And I'm going to tell you what I think it's going to ultimately look like tonight, how they're going to attack, why they should attack certain positions a certain way, and so forth and so forth. So that'll be tonight's show. Wednesday, I'm going to give you a free agency frenzy preview because we'll be a week away from the actual start of free agency. That will encompass the entire league, talking about teams that'll be shopping for a quarterback, teams that have franchise tag players. We saw Breece Hall will be tagged. Again, we talked about all of this here on this channel. I told you Breece Hall wasn't getting the free agency. Alec Pierce isn't getting the free agency. Kyle Pitts isn't getting the free agency. George Pickens isn't getting the free agency. All of that has basically come to fruition. So none of this should be a surprise if you've been, watching this channel. We've talked about guys that weren't going to make it to free agency. And so none of this alters what the Commanders were going to do. Trey Hendrickson was never going to be franchise tagged in Cincinnati. That doesn't alter what the Commanders are going to do because I don't think he's on the Commanders' radar. So there's that. Hey, Scotty, what up? My guy, Scotty, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, you need kickers, even though Rio doesn't like them. Rio doesn't think they're real human beings, okay? The amount of disrespect Rio has for place kickers is extraordinary. I've never seen anything quite like it. He hates kickers with a passion. I don't have any issues with kickers because I realize the importance that they hold. Now, are kickers my favorite thing to talk about? No. Much like officials, I'd much rather have my kicker be out of sight, out of mind, right? When you're called upon, do your job. Otherwise, same with the long snapper. That's a better analogy. I like my specialists to be guys that we don't talk about, like your offensive linemen, basically. Unless they're doing something really extraordinary, I don't really want to hear from my offensive tackle, because if I hear about my offensive tackle and he's not doing something great, that means he's making a boo-boo, right? He's getting beat. He's getting penalized for something. I'd rather not hear about my offensive lineman, right? That means they're doing a hell of a job. I don't want to hear about my specialists. We send you out there for an extra point, make the extra point. We send you out there for a field goal, make the field goal. Let's keep it pushing. But anybody that tries to downplay the importance of a kicker, you're falling into a trap. You're falling into a trap. These guys are so important. And without them, you can't win anything of note. Look at the Super Bowl winning teams here of late. The Eagles, they had a issue at kicker with Jake Elliott 2 years ago when they won the Super Bowl, right? But he got his act together in the postseason, right? He's been a really good kicker throughout his career. He struggled mightily in 2024, but he got his act together in the postseason. Last year, this year rather, the Seahawks kicker, Jason Myers, was one of the best kickers in football. And he needed to be. Did you see the Super Bowl? No one had scored a touchdown. The only points scored going into the fourth quarter were all field goals, and they were all by Jason Myers. Imagine not having a good field goal kicker and trying to win that game the way Seattle was playing. You never know how bad you need a kicker until you can't get the ball in the end zone. And I watched San Francisco win a game last year, 15-13 with 5 field goals. That was the first game that they got rid of Jake Moody and brought in their new kicker, Eddie Pinheiro. Welcome to the team, Eddie. Go make 5 kicks and win us the game. Remember our 7 field goal game? I don't have to tell you. Our first game with Austin Seibert against the Giants, week 2, needed 7 field goals to win that game. All 7 of them. You need kickers, man. You need kickers. So hopefully Jake Moody is that guy, right? I think they're going to bring him back. Long story short. Video channel, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, video channel writes, Lou! Video channel. You see the Bears center just retired, 27 years old. No, I did not see that. It's not shocking, though. Some guys, like, football is fun for some, and they can't imagine doing anything else. For others, it's a job. And then some guys prioritize health. Like, if I grew up wanting to be an attorney, or I grew up with some other passion, and football just happened to be my method of getting through school, and then eventually I was good enough to make it to the league, so I did it, and it allowed me to accumulate all this wealth early on in my life. Because unlike most walks of life, athletes come into their wealth in the direct opposite nature of what we are accustomed to seeing happen in our society. Generally, you work through your 20s and your 30s and you start to accumulate wealth, or you get to the point where you start to be in a position to accumulate wealth in your 40s and 50s. Football players and athletes are the direct opposite. They run into their wealth in their 20s, into their 20s, into their early 30s, and then they have to find a way to manage that, wealth that they've come into the rest of their life, because their earning, window is very short. So maybe that center, because we've seen guys retire prematurely before. Offensive line, and especially center, it's a tough job, because every play you're getting hit. Every play you're bumping heads with somebody, and eventually you might, what? I don't need this shit, man. I don't need this. I got so many other things going for me. I've made good money. I can use this as a seed to invest in the thing that I know I can do. I'm going to go do that. And here's the beauty of it. He's 27 years old. Let's say he goes out, pours some money into a venture over the next 2 years. It doesn't work. He'd probably come back and play at 29 if he wanted to. But a lot of times when guys walk away at that age, they don't come back. They don't come back. No, I didn't see that. So that just means it's another team on the free agent market that needs a center. And that's a shame, because they built that offensive line last year. Like, they went out, they traded for guys, they really spent resources. So that means they'll probably be looking for a center. My guess is in the draft. My guess is in the draft. They may look for one in free agency. Tyler Biadasz is available. Anyway, I digress. So I will definitely see you guys later on this evening. We will be talking about the Commanders' free agency plan. We are really going to dive into what I think they are going to do. I do think that they're going to do specific things, target specific groups. I think there are certain things that they're going to do based off of the ideology of wanting to go into the draft with flexibility. I'm going to talk about that tonight. I've talked about that with you guys before, but I think it's even more pertinent this time around because of where they sit in the draft and the options that may be available to them. So I'll talk about all those things and more later on tonight. But That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. The likelihood is, as soon as I get off this show, something will happen news-wise with the Commanders. You know how this goes. Hopefully nothing happens, but because it's me, you know what it is. Anyway, speaking of knowing what this is, post up, take command. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys next time. Until then, you guys have a good one. Take care. Peace.